For their own safety, the identities of many of the people in this video have been changed or hidden. Their testimonies, however, are true. This ancient land of the pyramids was predominantly Christian in the early centuries after Christ. From the 7th century onward, with the initial Islamic invasion in 639 AD, Islam has been the dominant religion. Despite centuries of persecution and discrimination, the Christian community still remains. Some government figures have suggested that Christians make up 12% of the country's population, the largest in the Middle East. The majority of Egypt's Christians belong to the Coptic Church. Despite the prominent Christian community, the country's constitution gives preference to Muslims. Christians are often treated as second-class citizens, denied political representation, and often discriminated against in education and employment. The Egyptian constitution clearly states that Islam is the country's official religion and is the main source for determining the laws of the land. Freedom of religion applies only when someone wants to convert to Islam. If someone wants to leave Islam for another religion, that's prohibited. Youssef, a Christian from a Muslim background, wants that to change. Youssef, who left Islam over 20 years ago, has written books and articles trying to influence Egyptian society to recognize all its citizens as equal.
Christians do not have complete rights. They are not allowed to talk about their religion outside of the church. Only Muslims can discuss their religion. This is our struggle, to change the laws and have freedom, so people can choose to change their religion.
Youssef admits it will be a long struggle, but a battle he says is worth fighting.
To guarantee the basic rights for all people.
We are following Islam in all the laws. We have in the Penal Code Article 98F, where it's against the law to disdain the heavenly religion. All the converts who are facing jail and accusations are charged with that article because they have turned to Christianity, and under the law, you are disdaining Islam.
So trying to change one's religion from Islam to Christianity is very dangerous. This university professor from a Muslim background was jailed 3 times after coming to Christ 35 years ago. He has to be very careful in living out his Christian faith.
The situation in Egypt is getting worse by how the government and society treats these converts. Because of the influence of the fundamentalist Muslims has increased, and they are controlling areas of the society. These people are treated badly and are rejected.
Dr. Abdul adds that some high-profile cases of believers from Islamic backgrounds wanting to officially change their religion is drawing international attention. One such case is that of Muhammad Higazi, who is in hiding along with his wife and daughter. Higazi took the unprecedented step of going to court to change his religion from Islam to Christianity on his national ID card. The story was leaked to the press and led to a firestorm of controversy that seemed to reach every major Arabic-speaking television station.
Anyone who becomes a Christian must be mentally ill.
Muhammad's highly publicized trial went to court, but the judge refused to acknowledge his right to change his religion to Christianity. If Muhammad goes against the court, he could face 3 to 10 years in prison and a hefty fine. Muhammad and his then pregnant wife Christina began running from the law. A month later, baby Miriam was born while they were in hiding. Christina's family and friends have threatened to kill her because she married a convert to Christianity.
I love my parents so much. I want them to know that I'm praying that the Lord will open their hearts and minds, that He would show them the way and that they would get the same blessings that I'm getting.
Muhammad's family was just as angry. In an interview with the local newspapers, Muhammad's father said, "I'm going to try to talk to my son and convince him to return to Islam. If he refuses, I'm going to kill him with my own hands." Shortly afterward, Muhammad released this response.
I would like to send a message to my dad. I saw what you said in the newspaper. You say you want to kill me, to shed my blood in public. But I love you so much because you are my dad and because Jesus taught me to love. I accepted Jesus Christ willingly. Nobody forced me. I forgive you. No matter what decision you make, no matter what you do, to my dad and mom, I say Jesus Christ died to save me.
Muhammad and his family were supported through the Voice of the Martyrs Canada in partnership with Christians in Egypt through a Safe House program, which provides shelter and safety to believers from Muslim backgrounds. Muhammad became a follower of Jesus over 10 years ago when he was 16. Muhammad's new faith in Jesus was tested early and often. State security was called in by his father, and Muhammad was arrested and questioned by a very aggressive officer.
His questions were about who helped me to embrace Christianity, and he wanted to know names of the people. But I told him my testimony about how I listened to the Christian radio station and that nobody helped me to become a Christian. So he spent 3 days torturing me in a very serious way, a very rough way. He was beating me, he was whipping me, he was putting his shoes into my face.
Muhammad says there is a specialized office in the state security against Christian evangelism.
All the officers in that office are really fanatic about their Islam, really religious. They're very tough and severe against the Muslim converts to Christianity and the Christians. This officer was praying and taking more energy to torture me. Others also beat me. They put a blindfold over my eyes so I couldn't see where I was and where I was about to be beaten. I couldn't understand my crime, why they were doing that to me, just because I was a Christian. After 3 days, the officer brought in a Muslim scholar who tried to convince me to return to Islam. I told him I didn't need anyone to convince me because I was a Christian.
Despite death threats, torture, and imprisonment, Muhammad has stayed true to Christ.
I've been arrested dozens of times. I can't remember how many times. A few days each time, once for 2 months. Sometimes they would torture me and sometimes they wouldn't even ask me questions.
Muhammad has been surprised by the major uproar his case has caused.
I've spent years being treated as a criminal, and I don't know what my crime is. I just want to live as a normal Christian, worshiping God, going to the church without that kind of persecution I'm facing every day. At that time, my wife was pregnant. We don't want our child to live as a Christian at home and a Muslim at school with his friends. Since we filed the case, all the local press wrote about it. But they were against me. They wrote against my reputation. Many Muslim scholars issued the fatwa saying I must be killed. On television, people were saying if they meet me on the streets, they'll kill me. Many fatwas have come up saying I must be killed.
Muhammad says God has protected him and his family many times.
Like, for example, we had rented an apartment, but we moved out the day before the fanatical Muslims came and burned the apartment, and then burned all our furniture in the streets in front of everybody. Another time, the building where we were living was surrounded by fanatical Muslims for a month and a half. Later, they killed a Christian nun who had helped my wife. They burned her.
It may be many years before Muhammad and his family are officially recognized as Christians. But he says he's prepared to wait and pray. In the meantime, he will continue to spread the gospel and serve the Lord in whatever way he can. Egyptian law allows Muslim men to marry Christian women. Christian men are not permitted to marry women from a Muslim background. Joshua has learned the consequences of what happens when you marry a woman from a Muslim background. Joshua and Mary were friends in school and later attended church together in 2005. They grew in their passion for Jesus and studied God's Word together. They fell in love and married in 2006. That's when the trouble began with local authorities.
I found her to be a good Christian, and that attracted me to her. And I love her, and she loves me, and we became everything to each other. But the last 16 months, we have been separated. We have been forced to be separated from each other, and I don't know what to do to get her back.
In 2007, Mary was captured by police and returned to her Muslim family. Mary and Joshua are rarely able to see each other or talk to each other on the phone. When we spoke to Joshua, he hadn't seen his wife in 4 months. The day we met Joshua, he had been released from jail, the 7th such time he had been incarcerated. The longest time he spent behind bars was 19 days.
In the beginning, I was called to meet one officer, and he asked me some questions. He was looking for a specific answer. When he didn't get what he wanted from me, he pressed a button, and someone comes in, blindfolded me. They took me to an upper room, and they beat me with their fists on my face. They tied my hands behind my back and kept kicking me, slapping me. Sometimes they pull my ears so hard, and other beatings and torture,
which included being choked by the rope of his cross because he refused to remove it.
Sometimes they pull it so I can't breathe. 3 times they have broken the rope using this to torture me.
The purpose for the imprisonment and beatings is to force Joshua to produce his marriage certificate proving he married a Muslim, even though Mary is now a Christian.
According to their law, a Christian can't marry a Muslim. They feel I insulted her family by marrying her. That's why they keep bringing me to the police station and torture me. If I give them the marriage certificate, that will cause more problems. This would be the evidence against me that I married a Muslim. It's against Sharia law. This would make big problems.
Like a lengthy prison sentence. Mary has also been pressured by her family, local officials, and even a Muslim leader to return to Islam and end her marriage.
She hasn't been tortured at this time. They are trying to deceive her by giving her whatever she wants and get her to abandon Christ and go back to Islam. She has told her parents and the officers she won't leave Christ, and she won't leave me. An officer sent her to a sheikh in another town to get her to go back to Islam. They tried to force her to drink something satanic, but she refused. I feel I can't do anything without her. I feel confused. I can't live without her. I am continually thinking about her and praying how I can get her out of this situation. We believe God will get her back to me, and that's why I have to go through this.
Because of all this, Joshua has faced harassment at work from government officials. He's been fired several times. He's also been told that his mother will be tortured unless he produces his marriage certificate. But in the midst of his difficulties, Joshua is determined to get his wife back and stay faithful to Christ.
We believe Jesus is allowing us to go through this. He has the answer and will do something special for us. This makes my faith stronger.
Olly grew up in a devout Islamic home, where he was taught to hate Christians, Jews, and any non-Muslim. His mother hosted 3 weekly meetings teaching Muslim women about Islam.
Year after year, I started to get far from the God of Islam because I couldn't understand how a God could have all that hatred. I was hearing stories about the Prophet Muhammad and how he killed hundreds of thousands of people and led 27 invasions against different tribes.
While Olly became disillusioned about Islam, one of his brothers was becoming more devout and eventually rose to leadership in a militant Islamic group that committed terrible acts of violence, including murder. Olly would leave Islam and become an atheist. Over the next few years, he spent a lot of time reading, even picked up a Bible just for general reading. He read the Bible every day for a year, spending most of his time studying the Gospels.
To my surprise, I found a person like Jesus Christ, filled with all that love. Jesus not only loves his followers, those who love him, but even his enemies. That was a surprise.
And that surprise led Olly to become a follower of Jesus Christ. But it came with a cost.
I was rejected by my family and my colleagues at school. I started to be called up by security. I was beaten at school in the mornings and called up by security in the afternoon every single day. In 1990, I was jailed.
It was during that time that Olly was tortured again, this time brutally. He was beaten, hung upside down, and electrocuted in an effort to convince him to return to Islam.
You are totally naked and your hands tied behind your back, and a blindfold is put over your eyes, and they electrocute you in a very sensitive area.
But the imprisonment and intense torture failed to persuade Olly to renounce Christ and give up the names of other Christians. In fact, he says his many sufferings have deepened his faith, and for that he is grateful.
Being tortured pushed me to be stronger than I was. I don't think they could understand a faith that was in the heart. They were focusing on the external. I was able to withstand the torture over the years. All my answers were trying to tell them why I became a Christian, and they were totally provoked by my answers that I was trying to evangelize them.
Olly is now in ministry, working with those who, like himself, have left Islam for Christianity, to help them grow in their relationship with God and encourage them, and to help them with their physical needs like finding a place to live and employment. Many are cut off from their families or fired from their jobs for becoming Christians. Mustafa was also raised in a devout Muslim home, and along with his family, he kept the Muslim rituals and traditions. He did so because it was the only way to avoid hell. One of his close friends told him he'd become a Christian. Mustafa was intrigued. No one he knew had ever left Islam for Christianity, so he committed himself to learn more about Islam.
I couldn't find anything for me in the Quran or the Islamic teaching. At the time, my friend read with me Matthew 5, 6, and 7, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. As soon as he started to read the Bible, I was deeply touched. My soul was filled.
Mustafa, who was 19 and in the military at that time, read the New Testament 4 times the following week.
I decided to follow Jesus, and 4 months later, me and 3 of my friends were arrested and put in jail. I was arrested so I could be an eyewitness against my friend, who baptized me and helped me to become a Christian.
Mustafa was released after a month. For the next 4 years, he was active in reaching Muslims with the gospel until he was arrested again. And this time, he was humiliated.
The officer was a homosexual, so he raped me. I was raped 4 times, and I couldn't talk about what happened for 10 years until after I was healed inside because of what happened to me at that time.
Mustafa and Deborah were married in 1996. They had been forced to move often, and he was constantly fired from his job after authorities told his Muslim landlords and employers that he and his wife left Islam to become Christians.
Every month the security knew where we were living. They came to tell the neighbors and the managers of the people looking after the buildings and the Muslims around us that we were converts from a Muslim background, and that put our lives in danger. We had to move every time. We moved 9 times in a period of 6 years.
Many times Mustafa and Deborah had no money or food. What was even worse was the rejection they faced from other Christians.
At first, the Christians were pushing us to go to the church and be at the meetings. But after I went to jail and was released, they came to me and told me I was a source of trouble. They said, "Please don't come to the church again. Keep your distance from us to avoid us having problems."
The friend who brought Mustafa to Christ helped him and his family relocate to another city. Soon afterward, Mustafa and his friends started a ministry together.
We started a ministry that focused on people from Muslim backgrounds and bringing the gospel to them, and at the same time changing the minds of Christians towards Muslim converts.
While it's been exciting for Mustafa to see many Muslims come to Christ, it's also been heartbreaking at times.
Many of the believers from Muslim backgrounds have suffered for years and even died for the name of Jesus. We know some were buried alive because their families killed them. Some died after their families poisoned them. Some died in fake car accidents in the streets.
Mustafa and Deborah are committed to staying in Egypt and reaching as many people as possible with the gospel. Deborah began her walk with Christ in 1992 when she was 17. In order to protect her identity, her face is covered with a hijab, a head covering worn by many Muslim women.
When I was reading in the Quran, I found out the position of women in Islam are much inferior to men. She didn't have any rights like a man. She couldn't testify in court like a man. 2 women are equal to a man. That really shocked me. I started to wonder how the God of Islam could be filled with such hatred. He is ordering his followers to kidnap, to kill. The Quran is full of violent verses and blood.
Through the witness of a Christian cousin and listening to a Christian radio broadcast, Deborah began to open up to the gospel. Then one day she read a verse in the Bible that changed her life.
The verse about loving your enemies, for me it was astonishing, because I couldn't understand how a God could say that and how he could be a God at the same time. It was really amazing. In Islam, we don't have that concept of loving the enemy. We have the concept of an eye for an eye, a hand for a hand. I couldn't understand how a God could be filled with such love, even love for the enemies.
When Deborah's mother found out she'd become a Christian, she kept her from leaving the house. Deborah was denied outside contact for 3 years.
I was a prisoner in my own home without even being able to talk to my own family. They were treating me like an infidel, an unclean thing.
Deborah and Mustafa became friends when they were 15. Mustafa was a believer at the time, but Deborah didn't know about his conversion. When Mustafa discovered that Deborah also had converted from Islam, he asked her family's permission to marry her. At first, her family agreed and accepted him. But when they started to suspect that he also was a Christian, they began to treat them both very badly.
My father told me I couldn't marry that man, but I insisted. I told him I will not marry another man, and he beat me.
But in spite of everything, Deborah says the Lord is with her and her family.
We are sure the Lord is protecting our lives, but in our society and with the mentality of our population, you can't risk staying in a neighborhood when they know you are a convert from a Muslim background. Fundamentalist Muslims can easily kill you, and they will have all the protection of the security if they do so.
It's one thing for adults who have chosen to leave Islam and follow Christ and now face the backlash of that decision, but what about their children who just want to fit in? Deborah and Mustafa have a son.
What is hard to see every day is your son growing up with a dual identity, and as a parent, trying to help him to do that, to protect his life. He is a Christian at home and a Muslim at school and learning the teachings of Islam and the Quran. These teachings go against his faith and what he is being taught at home. This is really hard for a mother to see.
I am known as a Christian in my neighborhood, and my son is known as a Christian in my neighborhood, not as a Muslim. When he started to play with the kids, then they refused to play with him because he was a Christian. They told him to pray as they prayed if he wanted to play with them. One time in the religion class, the teacher was saying, "We don't believe in Christianity because the Bible is corrupt." So my son stood up and asked her, "Who corrupted the Bible? If it is the book of God, like the Quran says, why would God allow it to be corrupted?" He was punished for arguing with the teacher.
The difficult moments for my son are more difficult for me than my own hard times. I went through so much because he is the most loving person I have in life. Our children have been through much more than we can imagine.
Some Christian female teens have been abducted and forced to convert to Islam. Others have been enticed to renounce their Christian faith by promises of wealth and a more prosperous life as a Muslim.
They drug them, then force them to marry Muslim men. They abuse them sexually and take pictures. And with those pictures, the girls feel ashamed, and they can't return to their families, so they continue as Muslims. Last year, we had about 40 cases of minor girls, 15, 16, 17 years old, who were kidnapped while returning home from school and never returned to their families.
These kidnappings leave the Christian families devastated as police do little or nothing to help bring these girls home.
One of the most famous cases we had was 2 or 3 years ago when 2 sisters, one was 16, the other 17, they disappeared all of a sudden. Their families didn't know what happened to them. They were married to Muslim men who were brothers. They were veiled and had children. Then they came to their families after 2 years and said they married these Muslim men by their free will and wanted to officially change their religion to Islam. They were both under 18 years old.
Rachel grew up in a Muslim home but came to faith in Jesus while a teenager. Since then, she has faced several arrests, beatings, and torture at the hands of Egyptian police. Rachel has been hiding for the past few years and was living in a safe house when we met her. She continues to share the good news and distribute Bibles. She is one of the many being helped by our partners in Egypt.
Until we can find a place for them to stay, far from their families to avoid being killed, until we find them a job, they live in safe houses. One girl we helped, her father cut her arms with a knife, and she was badly wounded. The wounds were infected when she came to us. Her father told her that I fed you and raised you, and now I will cut your arms to prevent you from helping anyone with the Bible. She had 12 stitches in one arm and 8 in the other.
Another way in which the Voice of the Martyrs Canada is helping advance the kingdom of God is providing evangelists with a powerful book called Sons of Ishmael. This book features testimonies of former Muslims who have come to faith in Christ, including Mustafa.
In Egypt, the population is not used to the idea of a Muslim becoming a Christian. But the media, local press, and everyone else is talking about Christians embracing Islam every day. So when we give a book like The Sons of Ishmael to a Muslim, the name is not shocking at all. It looks like any Arabic book, but the content is shaking the cornerstone of the Muslim.
The testimonies in this book are very diverse.
We have an intellectual convert. We have a fanatical Muslim who embraced Christianity. We have stories of just an average Muslim woman to people who studied Islam very hard. All the diversity helps Muslims reading the book to find themselves in it. This book is also a source of encouragement to the converts from Islam who are struggling and in pain. It's not only a book of testimonies, but the lives of people who are suffering for the sake of Jesus Christ.
This book has also been translated into English under the title Into the Den of Infidels and is available from the Voice of the Martyrs. Mustafa, Olly, and others in their ministry team have had opportunities to leave Egypt and live in safety somewhere else. But yet they stay.
I refused all those offers because I believe we need to save our relatives, families, and friends, and stay here for them.
Maybe we will die, but we decide to stay, because if we leave the country and maybe have a peaceful life, maybe raise our children in a normal life, but our country, relatives, our family won't be saved, because the church doesn't have what we have, the common language with the Muslims. They don't know how they think, but we have that.
We can't leave our relatives, the converts from Muslim background, without help.
Find out more about how you can get involved with the work of the Voice of the Martyrs in Egypt and around the world. Visit our website at persecution.net or call our office toll-free at 1-888-298-6423.